And I understand that you just came back from the gallery. You saw the work. Is that correct? So you know, did it spoil everything? You know everything that I do already? Okay. So I work in the oil, and in these pieces, you know, there's a way that I'm working with very old technology that goes back 600 years. Painting hasn't really changed that much. The materials that I'm using are origined in the Renaissance. And in that way, I haven't really messed with that recipe. You know, if you look at some of the famous names in art history and Ninja Turtles, I guess, you could see how those materials are very constant going forward. And there has been innovations, there's been changes, and painting as itself has grown. But the type of painting that I'm doing is really like 1450s, and I'm using linseed oil, I'm using oils, I'm using panels, I'm using gesso, and I'm using brushes. And so as I advance and show some of these finished works, I'm also incorporating into that mix my understanding of printmaking and graphic design and all the other tools that I've learned over the years. And I like learning. You know, I was joking earlier in the previous workshop that somehow I found a way to make a living without ever leaving school. I've been in school since kindergarten and I've never left. And so I love learning. I love being in that environment and how I can learn from teaching, you know. And so as an educator, I always try to throw myself new experiments and new projects and sort of self-guided in terms of those projects that I'm doing. So I'm not just I don't know everything. I think that's really important to stress is I try to form situations where I have a curveball that is thrown my way because I'm creating a situation where I don't know quite how it's going to turn out. And so that's where I get really excited about trying those things that I've discovered and seeing how they might work or how they don't work. And at the end, you know, as artists, we're really adaptable individuals. We have problems that are given to us by our professors, and then later on by our bosses, and then later on by maybe ourselves. And then we figure out the best way to do it because we look at all the different possibilities and we find out that this is the right one because all those others are not the right possibility, you know, not the right solution. So the materials that I'm going to be focusing on today is using vinyl cutting and vector-based software like Silhouette, and also using Photoshop for raster images to drop in and form these patterns or shapes that I used to do by hand. And so you saw the size of the pieces in the gallery. These are relatively small. I'm interested in creating illusions in art where it looks like you can grab something and grab it, touch it. It activates the senses of the eyes, but also touch. And so I became interested in what painting can do to allow you to look into the window of the piece. And through that, I started to think about, well, where do we see these mechanical forms? We see them in posters, we see them at retail stores, we see them in restaurant menus. It's part of our daily life to have this sort of graphic response, this manufactured die-cut entity that's combined in with maybe things you find in antique stores. And so I became interested in how the oil paint can feel very new and graphic and mechanical or plastic. Not touched by human fingers, and then how the oil paint can also feel like there's been wear and tear and haphazard construction and something that feels like it's been having like a level of decay to it. So this is an example of an older piece, and I do want to show that because for a long time I was doing very careful brushwork to get those patterns in. It's not that I'm relying on the vinyl cutter to do that, it adds a new tool in the tool belt is how I think of it. In my background, obviously I've had years of painting, but also my education was in printmaking. And when I think about building a piece, I try to look at I sort of think about the steps, like a chess player, you know, might look and say, oh, here's what I want to try to do, but I'm not just getting to the finality of it. I need to think of step 1, 2, 3, and 4 before I get to step 50. You know, in these paintings, I work really slow, guys. I'm not a quick painter, and there's a lot of planning and editing and the fallibility of mistakes, you know, they happen. So this is a kind of a turning point if we're looking at this work, because this is done by hand. this area inside here, and I'm very carefully drawing and painting to get that beveled surface. Do you know what I mean when I say beveled? Like it looks like it's recessed. You know what I mean? So that looks like, I'm doing that by hand. I'm painting all the shadows to look as real as they could be. And then this area had this design in mind to surround that painting of the eye. And I wanted to do something that was a new material I just bought. And I said, I'm going to try it there. And then I started to experiment in other pieces that were also happening at the same time. And this is a sound wave. Also looks like a cityscape. That was vinyl cut to get that painterly color. And then the text that is up here is cut by vinyl to make that part of the painting. Actually, the word balloons were vinyl cut, where this one was not. You know, so it was really a pick and choose how I was forming which areas will be aided by that material, and then others that were aided by simply drawing and painting carefully. And at the end of the day, I didn't want it to look like, oh, that's machine produced and that's done by the hand. I wanted there to be a uniformity and a unification of the piece to where it all looks like it's printed. Did anybody walk in there and be like, these are prints? Yeah, okay, I get that. I get that sometimes. Other times someone might say, oh, you draw on Procreate, you know, and then you print these off, or you paint and then you print because there's no brush strokes. But this is an okay illustration to show like how I start, and I have the sequence on the top left where you can see that there's a drawing of this space gun. I've got it placed. I took that drawing and I scanned it in, I vinyl cut around it. And basically I think of this as a stencil that will protect the area that I'm trying to paint. Similar to doing screen printing. Has anybody had a printmaking background, taking prints?
Oh, I'm taking it.
Yeah, what kind of prints do you do, all of you? Like,
right now I'm doing just straight up from lino to...
Lino cut, like relief? Yeah, any others? So there's different ways of doing printmaking, and what I learned from that in my experience is like, I think about this, it's that where do I want to paint, but also where do I want to avoid getting paint on my surface? And if I can go with that mindset, it allows me freedom to paint everywhere, as long as I'm also aware of where the paint cannot hit. You know, it's almost like, this is kind of like a funny analogy, but you know the game Operation? Like you reach in, you get the stuff, and you grab them, you grab with the tweezers. It's like, that's how I think about my paintings, is like, I can move anywhere inside that track and grab those bones or bread baskets or whatever inside of that operation table. But as long as I'm not going outside and hitting the buzzer, that's where my painting falls, is that careful line that I can be very loose and very creative, but I'm not hitting the edge of it. So there's something about like toys or games that, you know, exist both in the imagery, but also the mentality of how I can get into the surface and allow play to happen. So anyways, here we go. We got some paint added. You can see some color change. There's some vinyl. And this is the rug from the movie The Shining that I'm using as the pattern back here, because I want something that relates to fear and childhood and violence in a way. And I formed that pattern, but there's no shadows, there's no splatter. And then in the next piece, you'll see it all come to fruition, where there's now shadows, there's now splatter, but I'm layering pattern and textures and surfaces one on top of the other in a painted collage way. But I've been trying to push the boundaries of what I can do with the material, and I've got it to print small enough that I can make a copy of my credit card, convincing enough that, you know, to print vinyl, it's not cutting out, it's not making a line like a toner printer would make, right? When you cut with vinyl, you're cutting a shape rather than making a line. And if you try to make it too small, and I've really reached the boundaries right about there, is it'll turn into confetti. You know, like the vinyl cutter, it doesn't want to cut out the shape. It's the X-Acto knife X-Acto blade will go back and forth, and it'll try to cut out that shape, but it cuts so much it just turns into shreds. You know, so that's where it reaches the limitations. But I find that really exciting about how far can I go until I hit that wall. And here's some examples. I try to use the vinyl cutting as an aid in surprising avenues, like that wire was vinyl cut. So I drew the wire in Procreate on top of a photograph of my piece, knowing I wanted to kind of bend in and out of those cubbies. These were also drawn in vinyl, whereas this tape and that bomb and some of these things and some of the more mechanical areas you think would be vinyl cut are not. And so pattern back here, this is a pretty obvious vinyl cut area. But yeah, like I said, I try to mix it into where it's woven. And so I think about, where do I see that in real life? You know, when you watch movies and it's really obvious, there's a special effects and it takes you out of the movie. You're like, I don't believe that character's motivation because that doesn't feel like a real CGI character. But if it's done well enough and combined with practical effects and really that kind of weaving in of real, feels real to the viewer, then perhaps it doesn't announce itself, you know? And so I find that really exciting to think of, like, how can I form those conversations between what is aided by those mechanical stencils versus what am I doing all by hand. But in the end, it's oil painting, and to respect the tradition of that is that it's working in layers and working in ways that I can fix by mixing the colors that are needed on top. The really forgiving thing about a lot of artwork is that if it doesn't work right, if it doesn't work or look right, we know how to fix it. And that's what we do as artists, is that we see the problems and we try to jump in and fix those areas. This is kind of deceiving, you know, because it looks like it's behind, but that is one of the last things that was added to this entire painting. So I will get into those areas of reversal where I'll create this color blend first, and then I'll start painting on top of it, even if it's meant to look like it's behind, like that area. I'll use this painting that is not in the show as a way to illustrate some of the tools that I'm using. So this is a larger 36 by 36 inch painting. And in this piece, I want to show this challenge. I was really interested in creating this map of the US that had different levels to it. And those levels are reflected by how the states were voting during a past election cycle. Okay, so when you look at, like, oh, this is a red state, that's a blue state. Why is it red? Why is it blue? Those numbers, I became very interested in looking at a graph that represented the model accurately, rather than just like a bar graph. I wanted these to feel like states. So first of all, materials, you can see that I'm working pretty small. If I do that, I can't drink soda that day. And so here's my paints. It's all really old technology. I wear a headset to see better. So that something that's this big is going to be that big. Drafting tools. I'll work on panel. I'll sand down panels. I was talking to some faculty member about the prep that I do, and I use these. You know what these are used for usually? No, this is. What's that?
For dishes?
Is that? It's cleaning dishes. And so think of how smooth you want your dishes to look, right? I do that to my paintings. So when I paint, I let it dry, and then I do that. And I basically wash my dishes without soap. So I do that to get the surface very smooth.
Is that before the gesso or after?
It's in between every layer of paint.
Okay.
So if I have 50 layers of paint, I'll use either a razor blade or I'll use this, but I'm always touching it to examine if there's any brush strokes that I need to remove.
And it doesn't take the paint out?
No, because I'm very careful.
Okay,
sometimes yes, but sometimes no.
Too much soda.
Yeah, I have to be careful. But you get an idea of how these start off is that I'm doing just some surface prep. And then I do a lot of drawings, and this is just my training about what I'm looking for and figuring out ideas. These are drawings that related back to that map. And so this is the first iteration, was I was guessing and trying to look at how I wanted it to feel. And then I brought that into Photoshop, and I scanned this in, and then I started to bring a real map on top. I used skewing tools to throw that into perspective. And I basically did a mock 3D line work. And then I brought that into SketchUp to create a proper 3D map. And for me, it's like I get to learn how to do those things because of the need of the piece, right? And so what this also allowed for me to do is move the camera around and find the perspective I wanted on that map. Once I had a good feeling for it, I brought it into a combination of Photoshop. And you can see I'm using a lot of grids and rulers to find my placement. because I'm very obsessive about kind of like altarpiece symmetries and using numbers that make sense. And then I'm also using Procreate to draw on top of it and find out how I want those shadows or more organic areas to look. Okay, here's a silhouette cutter. Who's done silhouette or vinyl cutting before? Anybody? Yeah, and which programs have you used when you do it?
I guess like the Cricut program.
Yeah, Cricut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I use Procreate to kind of make my design, and then I transfer it over to Cricut, and then from there, if it's a good enough size image, it won't have a problem. But sometimes, like the feathering, and I guess the brush type and stuff kind of mess up.
Yeah, yeah. So this will look familiar at this point. And I use silhouette, and I saw another couple of hands. Anyone else vinyl cutting?
It's basically the same as in
Yeah, like Cricut.
or I've done it also just by hand.
Like cut it with
cut
X-Acto.
it.
Yeah, yeah, great. So just know what I'm doing is I'm taking my real key in real life, and so I scan that in, I make a black and white copy of it, I drop that into program, and then I'm using tracing tools to create the vector shape that will then cut that out. So that's pretty much my process. I'll show here briefly. But I think as we examine this painting surface, you know, it's like there's a lot of work that doesn't show up, and I'm doing these dials. I have to work in layers. So this is like my first vinyl cut I'm putting down. I later put that on top of it. And then I later add all the shadow work and kind of the grungy metal things just by brushing, just knocking it back. But you can see here, like all these plates that were vinyl cut. I have all these different locks. To make a lock in perspective, this looks really strange, but that's what that piece would look like if I just did like a contour line drawing of it in a 3/4 point of view, right? So that was a match for this style up here. Get the idea? Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, these are some pretty difficult, but I feel successful attempts on how I was using that device, because I wanted to create something that harkened back to gold leaf, altarpieces, real objects, trompe l'oeil. And so I'll just skip through a few more of these images to show the process, but that's the real photo, that's the black and white shape. And you can see this has a lot of line drawing on it that I'm doing multiple cutouts to get to not just one color, but I'm adding in multiple colors on top of that machine or that device.
Do you use a closed palette and then just add different value to create the colors?
Do you mean with the oil paint itself? Yeah, so it's a good question. When I get to the painting itself, I'll often work with a value-based palette for the first layer. So for something like this, I'll look at light and dark versions of the local color, the local values. And then as I progress, I'll start looking for reflective color, reflective light, some nuances that happen on the outer shell of it. And you know, the trick of that is to squint your eyes early on and then slowly open up your eyes over time. So I generally work from general to more specific with each of those layers. So things like texture, like these. This is all painted as one color, and then I add two colors, then I look at those in-between values. But I use a lot of thin paint to achieve that. So what you're looking at is not just one color, but it's light passing through. It's basically that Renaissance European painting school of thought. So just to show what this can be used for, I mean, I'm doing painting, but I've had the opportunity of working with a colleague of mine, Steve Hilton. He's a ceramicist. He says, I'm going to do a piece that's for a charity auction. Do you want to join me? And I said, yeah, let's do that. So he made the shape of this bowl. It's about this big. And I said, well, how am I going to get that vinyl to stick into it? So in order to do that, I had to get creative with my 2D shapes to fall in that. And then I used an airbrush, and I did all the coloration inside and out. But this is the outcome, is getting some really cool, clean lines on his ceramics work, which I'd never done before. But I just basically used this image in the top right area to copy over into that. So I'm able to reuse designs once I make them. It's really cool. I'm going to skip ahead and show some student work and what the students in the levels of painting 2 and 3 are doing up at Midwestern State University. And some of these are in oil, some of these are in acrylic, but she became very interested in that very, very graphic design approach. So she would do tape, but then when it came time to do these designs inside here of portraiture or other designs, she was doing vinyl cutting, this American flag with her image right there. And a lot of the work at this point for her was about her identity and her family's identity as coming from two different places, both in the US, but also out of the US. So it's kind of the, where is home, basically. This is a pretty fun student work, and she had quite a time with it because these were all just painted very carefully with hand, but she wanted the text to look authentic, like a game show. And so she made this circular painting piece, and she very carefully laid out all of that and then painted through. This is a really cool one, more of a experimental test with doing like Ben-Day dots. Do you know that? Like Ben-Day dots? Like a dot matrix halftone is what she's doing. And then some very, very graphic work here. This has like, obviously painted by brush, but then integrating in with text. This is good to see because, that's a full black and white design, and you'd assume that the outcome would be very flat. But I really enjoyed how the student allowed the shape to act as a barrier between like the summertime and this sort of like fall colors. And you can see the leaves and the way that the branches feel more alive. And then once they go outside the gas mask, they feel dead. Failed attempts. The student had a very, very difficult time transferring this design over to the piece. And so what happened was something really cool that when she started to try to transfer it, it all kind of came apart like ribbons. Do you know what I mean? Because when you transfer it, it's not like you just pick it up and move it like a sticker. It's like you have to use a transfer tape and carry it over, and then you have to make sure it sticks. And she had a lot of difficulty. So I said, okay, it's not working. We have to go to another plan. So she ended up taking all these out individually and then placing them almost like, pre-cut line work that in my mind was more exciting than what she had originally planned. And here's just a couple others as I'm going through, and I think something like this is pretty obvious the way it was landed, but I think there's creative choices about how they're working with the text, compressing it, making it harder to read, doing some work that the viewer has to slowly unpack on their own. And this is another example where the student did the entire painting and then chose to cover up, 50 to more % of it, where the body is still there hiding underneath. But basically all those images on top were painted after laying down the vinyl die cut. And then a few last images. Any questions at all? I'll show you how it's done.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know you talked about like working on layers and stuff. How much time do you put between layers?
Oh yeah, for acrylic, half hour. If it's oil, 3 days.
And that's enough to, like you said, kind of rub it down with the brush that you use for the.
Yeah. So oil just takes longer to dry, and but I also work on multiples at a time.
Yeah.
And so what I like is that I'm in the studio and I'm doing the oil painting, but then when that's drying or in the middle of drying, I can jump on the computer and figure out, okay, what's the next step?
Yeah.
And it's not just one step. It's like I can think of like 4 or 5 things I have ahead of me, working with lists, things like that.
And what mediums do you like to use, like in between, like for oil painting mostly?
Yeah, with oil painting, I use linseed oil and I use liquid. I pretty much stick to one of those two, depending on what kind of surface I'm trying to get or the flatness I'm trying to get. I'm going to ask a question here. I need to switch screens to do the vinyls. Can I just close that?
Yeah, go ahead and close it, sir.
Okay.
And then from there, we'll go ahead and open up the app.
Okay, can I do, I'm going to do this. So open up the app first.
Yeah. And then from there, we can share this screen if you like.
Okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to add a few images in just so I have it ready. So one minute, I'm going to throw some images into
On the floor.
They're gonna bring some chairs, I think.
Oh.
and I got one more.
So use the line.
Let me do,
Different gifts or art pieces, like,
I think that should be all right.
You like it?
yeah, like it's fun. It's tricky. It's really hard to use sometimes, but it's really fun.
Cut the
This one?
shape that you
I
want.
believe that's the one.
Oh, what
If
is
not,
this
we
one?
can share the desktop also if you like.
Oh, it's got two windows. So I'm going to share this one.
Okay.
It worked really good, but
I'll just, you know what, let's do desktop.
I've been wanting to invest in like a really good one and a big one. So I've been mainly just doing everything by hand. I know, I've been hinting at my husband.
Is that ready?
Like a mop or something.
With a little cricket or a pillow.
Because I'll also open up Photoshop, I think.
Make it easy.
That's
to go
fine.
into Amazon.
Cool, cool. Okay. All right, so graphic designers. Sure. I'll show this, and this will be roughly 20 minutes, and if there's questions, if they're very in-depth, I can answer those once we get more of the hands-on part of the project. But I want to be clear about what I'm doing in program and how I find it to be helpful. This is just a collection of designs that I ended up using for some of the work in the show. You might recognize some of these shapes from images that are currently out there. But what's kind of interesting is that when you see that shape and then you see the design that I'm cutting out, there's, you know, when you look at like old school lettering, like graphic design lettering, and there's shapes that don't appear as part of the letters, like there's swirls around G's or logo designs. That's what I have to look for is when I cut something out, I have to think of how I can remove some of those pieces. So I'm adding extra lines for my removal process. But you can see a lot of kind of simple silhouette imagery. And the way that this works, I'm going to go to a couple of these examples. I'm going to use this past student example, is that I drop in a prepared black and white image. So the first thing I need to do is that the image itself has to be black and white or black and white enough in order to work. And if it's not, if it's got a lot of grayscale, I'll show you what happens when you don't have black and white. But I try to resize it, and I can either resize up here in these controls, or I can resize just by doing it freely, depending on what I need to do. But I'll find the size first, and then I'll move that within the cutting area. I have roughly 11 by 11 inches to work with here. And from that, I'll go over to the trace tool on the right side. I'll select the portion I want to cut out, and it'll show me a preview of what will be cut out. The yellow will be my removed area, and everything else will be not. So I examine this for any glitches or areas that are having trouble, okay? And this one's really clean, so you're not gonna see that here. If you drop in a low res image, you'll get a lot of stair stepping, you know? So there's a way to fix that as well. Hit trace, and I'm gonna move this over to the side. And there's my red line. The red line basically means that's the X-Acto cut. Everywhere where that line is, it will X-Acto cut. It has to be shape-based though. And so if it's not shape-based, if you have a line that just goes like this, and it doesn't loop back to itself, it's not gonna remove, right? So that's something else I'm looking for, is that it does trace as a full loop, a full cycle. What's really cool about the program though, and I'm just using Silhouette, but there's many different vinyl cutting or vector-based programs. They'll be compatible with things like Illustrator as well. If I double click this, you get to see the vector points. Does that look familiar?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So if there is a problem, sometimes I do the simple fix, and let's look at that cluster just to see what's going on there. Simplify will usually take out some of those stair steps, which is really nice. And that's just the program trying to figure out where can we remove vector points throughout the track, right? Backing up. But if not that, I can do it individually. And let's say that I like that shape, but I wanted to pull it out further. I can grab it, and now I can mess with these individual vector points and arcs and sort of move them around and change their shape individually. So I've had to do that on occasion for very stubborn areas that weren't performing how I wanted them to trace. But for the most part, if I have a good scanned image, I'll be ready to go, and then I can go over to send and print it, no problem. Here's a drawing I did. And to show what this might look like if I were to scan it and print from it, I'll resize. I'm gonna do the same moves. But what you notice right away is that there's just so much more gray. And you'll notice the program struggling to find out where to cut, because it can't cut out gray, but it can cut out black and white. Select trace. I'm going to do that. Okay, I've got it highlighted. But notice that's a pretty cool shape. You know, it found all the dark grays and blacks, and it said anything that's darker than a midtone is going to default to a cutout area. But I can mess with that even more. So I have thresholds. Like I can go down. I can go up that high. At this point, you can see it breaking where anything that's like a light gray is starting to show up as a cutout. So that yellow is going to get cut, but maybe somewhere in the middle like that looks pretty good. And that would give you a, you know, like a really cool, like legal graffiti stencil, right? Like you could do something like that, and that's like, you know, like Banksy. Like that's what Banksy would do. So I'm going to do this trace, and then I'm going to pull that to the side so you can see it, and that's pretty intense. What you start to notice, though, and this is where the cleanup would occur, that is going to turn into chips or confetti, that these are individual marks that, oops, that might not want to cut because of the like the intensity that's happening inside here. You want more of a clean, singular shape, okay? So I wouldn't probably be able to use this, but what I could do is I could take that same image, and the fix is to drop it into Photoshop. There we are. And I could do some cleanup here. And so one cleanup that I can do is I can just make sure that I reduce the amount of values. I can get clever about it using curves or levels. But however you want to do it, there's not just one way, but you know, if you want to get in here and find better shapes, you can do it first in a program like this. Or I could do filters. I'm going to do a posterize. Like that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll drop it down. You know, something like that. That's kind of workable, but you see it still has that problem of the scratchiness around the edges, right? So how do I get rid of those is I'm going to take those out. More filters, I suppose. So now I'm going to drop it in and see what I can do with like a cutout shape. That looks a little bit better. I'm going to show on and off. So that's the original increase the contrast, but those won't cut out very well. So with another kind of filter, you see that that's helped with the shapes. And if I play around, that's very blocky. That's pretty blocky. Maybe that's too much. I'm just trying to find that sweet spot. Maybe like right in here looks okay. Then I would hit OK, and then I can drop that image in and do a better cutout. That all being said, imagine that you want to make a vinyl cutout piece, whether it's painted or printed or simply vinyl by itself, and you want to have multiple colors. Does anybody know how you might begin something like that using my, I'm going to go back to this image. Let's imagine that you like want a, like a 3-color grayscale. Does anybody know how you might start that? You could start with black and white. I'll try to simulate it here because it's, let's go back. I'm going to do, I'm going to make a couple copies and show what they could look like stacked anyways.
I was gonna say, I work in like multiples.
Yeah.
Layers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just like making my life harder.
No, that's how you do it. At least I'm sure there's better ways or different ways. But this is how, one way that you might find to be helpful is to make a layer that is more of your dark shape. And then I'll make one that is my midtones. And then this will be my light shapes only. Maybe it's going other way. I'm going to pull this in. There we go. So if you imagine that I'm doing like some cutouts, this would be like the lightest, even though it looks like it's the darkest, it ends up being the reverse. But you can lay down that vinyl cut, which is the biggest shape first, medium-sized shapes, and then you have the darkest darks last. And so that way you can have multiple cutouts, similar to doing like screen printing or working with multiple color relief. And that's how I learned how to do that, was doing multiple wood blocks and then understanding that this wood block is that color, that wood block is that color, you know what I mean? So if you have like a full color piece like t-shirts, you would have to plan out which colors are on each block. And then you can save those, and then you can make them individual prints with vinyl. So that's a bit of what I'm doing in program. We're gonna hop into the other room and do the real stuff, the hands-on stuff. Does anybody have any quick questions while we're in here? Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that too complicated? Is that all right? So if we could, we're gonna move into the room. We have a lot of materials, and we'll use the next hour to make something and try out some of what I've been talking about. Okay, if I could have your attention over here, everybody. I'm going to talk about supplies that will be on your table and how we're going to use these. First of all, paper is going back if you want to continue moving that around. Make sure that you get one of these pages, one of these cards. Everyone gets one. You're also going to see sponge brushes and acrylic at your table. I will advise, though, that when you use this, try not to water it down. The water that will be at your table is only so that you can clean your brush, but the more water you add, it's going to mess up the paper. It's kind of fragile. But just be careful of knocking that around. Also going around, I've got words. I've got objects. I'm going to hold these up. We're going to be able to select from these pre-cut pieces that I brought in. And so at your table, you'll see that they're not cut out. And I'll show you the method about how to do that, to cut out so that they're ready. And basically, you're going to do some cutting and pasting to put it all together. So I think for the first one, just so that it's super clear, I might demo on this side, and we'll have everybody gather around and hover. I'll try not to mess up. So if we want to stand up and gather over here, I'll be doing one of these. Do I want to do here or this? I'll need a volunteer. And you're like, volunteering for what? You said yes before I told you? Yeah. So somebody's to sit here in case I need like multiple hands. And I'll describe what it is. If you want to be here too, pull up a seat. Sometimes it turns into a group project without
that's good.
without intending to be a group project.
Yeah, I know that.
Because there's some kind of detail, the ones that are harder to pick up.
I used to work at a screen printing place, and we did vinyl stickers.
You know about
and
that.
that was my first job, is to just pick out all the letters, like the A's and the O's. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's like all the little details for all the decals for every like mom that had like a kid in soccer.
Yeah, this also takes
The
me a minute
soccer ball, you know, all the little.
just to open these up.
Names.
Yeah.
Cut you. There. All right, what do we want to see? Is there a kind of a medium level one? I can try that. I can try this one. Do we want to try like the building? We'll try the building?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I've got the arrow. I could probably also try. Okay, so I'm gonna talk over here about some of these shapes. And what do I know about that shape? If I grab that sticker by the corner and I lift that off, what do I need to be careful about with this word?
Inside of it.
This one and this one. Okay, you're going to get floating shapes. And a floating shape is not connected to the greater whole, right? Like the inside of that R, the inside of that A, they're going to get lost. Sometimes you can place them just by eyeballing. You know, don't even worry about it. Other times, it might be such an issue, and I'm trying to find a shape that would definitely be problematic because of that. We had some very complicated ones this morning, but
Like the key, maybe.
maybe the key.
Just because like the whole, like, it
Yeah.
doesn't look centered.
Right, so it could be off a little bit. And so some of these shapes, this is another case of it. that little, this is the positive, but there's a negative shape of this, but you can see where there's going to be floating shapes potentially in some of these. So I'm going to show two methods to transfer, and I'll have some helpers over here just in case I need more hands. And I do invite some of you to work together if you get these more complicated versions. Okay, so this one I'm going to try to do with vinyl cut transfer. I'm going to do this one, in fact, because that's the right size I need. So first way to transfer is that if you have a positive shape, this is a positive shape. Do you see what I mean by that? Where this is a negative shape. So I'd be painting into the white. I'd be painting around the shape in the background. It really depends on what you want to do, and you can get really cool results either way. We had a student this morning do this as one of their shapes, and I basically said, you know what you're painting, right? And they said, no. I said, you're painting the sky, you're painting the water. And then when you put that down, you'll have blue buildings because the blue paper is going to show through. So that's going to be the way to harness this in your mind, is to understand what is showing through, being the paper, and what are you working on top of. In this case, this is the negative shape. So when you put that down, it's not the blue paper, but you're going to be painting the key itself, right? So I do both in my work. Sometimes I do that to protect a shape or to protect the background. Other times I'm doing it actively on the foreground. Let's go ahead and I'm going to do this. This is pretty easy. If it's a smaller shape, you can just take the paper, carefully lift, and just let it just fall, just like that, and push it in, okay? And already that's just like vinyl cutting on paper. Like, we're going to go one step forward with the painting of it, but I'm going to try to add this shape on as well. So these corners can be tough to get, so you have to, usually I'll use X-Acto knives or tweezers if I really need to get it. But I'm going to show how to work out those floating shapes. Genesis or Luis, do we have X-Acto knives in here? If you don't, that's okay. It's just my fingers are so clunky. All right, so I'm just going to lay that down. And what I'm being very, very careful about is not changing the shape a lot, but also it can't stick to itself because it's like, it's going to be really, really hard to take out and remove if, yeah, here we go. So here's what I like to do is that if I need to place that one, and if it's easy enough to eyeball, I'll grab an X-Acto knife. It's kind of like, it's what I learned by doing toy models, right? And just like it's going to go there, and I feel confident enough about it, that's where that's going to stay, okay? Something more complicated, I'll do ear, because I have floating shapes inside this one. This is contact paper. Transfer paper is used to take those very complicated shapes and move them from one place to another. So how this works is that I pre-cut the side of it, because it is a little bit difficult to remove from the backing paper. But what this is used for is to press on top of the vinyl, and then when I start to pull it up, it will remove the green, and the green will be here, and then I place it somewhere else. Everyone's got the idea? So you can put it here, you can put it on the wall. You know the vinyl that's out there?
Yeah.
Was that done with vinyl? Like, is that vinyl that's transferred on? Yep. So you know. But I use this a lot because I don't want to change certain shapes. There's some very complicated ones. I'll show you the most complicated is, see that pink and blue painting? Yeah.
Which one,
The very left.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it's got this, how do you say, like a golden rectangle Fibonacci sequence
Yeah,
happening to it.
The golden.
So
Yeah.
that was all one piece.
That's
that
one
you-
pull. That's one big circle that I had to pull all at the same time, and that was really tough. And the background over there for that piece was also one big pull. So you can imagine, like, I have like, I try to count them. I want to say maybe like at least 50 triangles.
Wow.
So that's, but the small one is well over 50. That's the background only. So yeah, you learn as you go. All right, here's the ear. I'll do the ear. And so you want to go away from your paper, let that drop. Just kind of let it grasp, gravity, massage it in. All right, and I might need help, we will see. So I'm going to start pulling this back. And so if you want to put your finger there, and then you can use both hands, I'm going to start to pull it back as much as I can so it has a good release. And what I'm doing is I'm looking for all the parts that they're not going to stick onto this. And to be fair, this is a little bit easier because it's nice and blocky rather than a lot of like those floating bits.
Maybe you have to go back.
And then you have to look, if it messes up, you have to put it back and then push it in and then pull it up.
Say you can use like a card or something.
Yeah.
Press.
And what I'll do is with this leftover paper, imagine I'm pulling that back, I'll use other paper to slide it in case it falls back. So if I need it to be, if I need to take a breather, I can lift it back up easy. Okay, so ear is going to go right there. And we're going to just place it, pull it nice and tight, massage it in, just like so. And then as I pull this back, and that will have your help this time, is to use X-Acto knife or whatever you're comfortable with, is hold that corner down. There, got it? And then I'm going to pull it at an angle to release the vinyl like so. And all I'm doing is I'm kind of doing diagonal and then I'm going that way because sometimes it's easier to get shapes based off of the direction I'm trying to get. So you see now I'm going against the A, right? So then when I get to that part, I'm going to be really careful that it stays.
You're like super careful. I'm like,
I know, overly careful. But I don't want to rip the paper too. It's like there's like I got to know what it.
Texture.
Yeah.
Whatever you're working on. Yeah.
I've pulled up paint that was 3 weeks old, 3 weeks of work, and I was like, oh. So I do that thing like if I get angry, I don't make a sound. I'm just really silent. And my wife was in the studio, and she's like, uh-oh.
What happened?
She's like, what happened? You were talking and laughing, all of a sudden it's like silence. I was like, I just have to repaint that entire area. This I would save because I can use it for something else. That's a good size. So that,
Couple use.
yeah, sometimes I keep that around. All right, so this is ready for paint. And do we want to do like a color on the outside? What do we want to see?
Maybe like a different color on the outside, different
So-
color on the inside.
Yeah, so I'll do like, okay, so this is a really good technique for this type of material is because it's a little bit watered down, just out right out of the bottle. So I'd be careful not to add too much paint, but also make sure that you're not pushing it underneath the vinyl. That's a mistake that can happen if you're not careful, is that, yeah, so it gets underneath. There's a fix for it, and you can put down clear medium
I was
sometimes.
about to say, I've seen videos where they use clear medium.
Exactly, right around the edge.
Yeah.
I'll add some white to this one too, and maybe like a horizontal thing. That could be kind of cool. So don't feel like it's like one color. You can get really creative with gradients, and this is a little bit thick. So what I would do is I would definitely let this dry, and you can add multiple layers on top. You can also do multiple designs on top, right? So let's imagine that you do that key, but you wanted the building to feel like it goes on front of it. You can do like one of those. And that's where you get like those layers that happen. And
Does the vinyl pull the paint out?
it can, yeah. And sometimes it's totally fine. And I've been using a 631 vinyl, which is more easy release rather than the 651, which is harder release. And so sometimes I have to like be careful about what is how sensitive that surface is before I pull it up. Yeah, let's do something on the ear. So this would be like a red and white. I'll just do put the red. I kind of like throw that in there just like that. And this looks really messy, but just remember that as long as your paint is not super chunky, when you pull that vinyl up, you're going to get the negative space to reappear. Oh, and I'm going to try something on this, like a texture. I don't know. So I'll throw that on there. This blue paper is a little bit dark, so it's okay to throw white occasionally as well. So that's that shape. And I'm going to pull some color off. I'm going to do some white, I think. I'll do white inside here while I'm at it. White with like black. Let's do white and black.
And the favorite color we've seen
Right, so these will just naturally be more blues, so if you want to offset that using more reds, yellows, you have to think of like that transparency of tone. And again, I'm being kind of just moshing that in, so you could do like a gradient. That could be kind of cool. So you can see outside coloration here, inside the shape, and then I'll do like a kind of like a hot spot in the middle. Maybe. And that could look kind of cool to do a gradient that is going out. Now, if there's a lot of paint, remember you can take your paper towels. Can I borrow this?
Yeah, go ahead.
And if you wanted to simply like lay that on here flat, do that, pull it up, then you get some good layering. And it's okay to let these dry. So based off of what I'm seeing here, it is wet. I don't want to pull it up right away. Oh, you can also do this. I'm going to show textures. This is too much. But if I do that, like keeping brush strokes intact is really cool.
Yeah.
You can also take a paper towel and like if you want to do like just down like that one time, it leaves a really good like stamp or texture. So feel free to experiment with this, but if you get a full page and you want to add more on top of it, you can do that. You can play around, but I'm going to let this dry, and when mine's ready, I'll reveal it, and you'll be able to reveal yours at the same time. So let's go back to our tables, and what we're going to do is I'm going to actually, okay, so when you look at these sheets, we have scissors that are at the tables, and you'll need to cut out your individual sheets. Call me over if you have any trouble with that.
Are there anything, there's already shapes cut in there, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like they're kind of hard to see, but if you get them in the right light.
Thank you.
Yeah.